All right, and that brings us to some more general analysis of the 300th YCS weekend. Of course, we have 3 tournaments from all over the world to talk about the results. So my own performance aside now, we've got some other things to take a look at. 300th YCS Dortmund, 300th YCS Richmond, and 300th YCS Guadalajara. We have results. The winning decks. We have Vanquish Soul, Yummy, Radiant Typhoon Tri-Brigade, and Vanquish Soul. Which, first and foremost, I think is the first thing to point out is that I think Vanquish Soul performed really, really well at these tournaments in general. Now, I will say, I think the overall, like I was surprised to see this because I thought Vanquish Soul was strong, but I personally, I think I rated it like a strong deck, but not like the best deck in the format, but it definitely performed like a top tier deck in the format. Or rather, maybe it's like, because I'm looking at these numbers, right? And I'm seeing like, okay, in Dortmund, we only had 2 Vanquish Souls in top 64. Maybe some more because not every list is known yet, so this is not the complete data set, but there was not that many Vanquish Souls if we compare it to like Draco Tales, for example. And in Richmond, we had 13 in top 64. And in Mexico, we had, okay, there's only info on 2 in the top 32, but they're also missing a lot of the decks from this. So maybe Vanquish Soul is the type of deck that like has a better time converting a top cut into a win, is how I would interpret this. You know, like if you make it into day 2 or if you make it into the top cut, then Vanquish Soul is a pretty solid choice, which is ultimately the reason why I personally didn't play Draco Tail. It's a very interesting concept if you really get deep into like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, what deck to play, because this is something I talked about the week before the event. I made a video where I talked about like deck choice and everything, and I mentioned like I think Draco Tail is a very, very solid deck that has a very high chance of making it into day 2. You know, and we do see Draco Tail being the most represented deck in top 64, probably at all 3. I mean, at the Mexican YCS right now, we don't have complete data, but for the most part, Draco Tail was the most represented deck in those top 64s. However, I also said that if you make it deep into the tournament, I think Draco Tail is not the most likely deck to win it all, because the chances that you play either mirror matches or you play against other players that are very well prepared for Draco Tail is very high. And this holds up. You know, in Dortmund, we had 5 Draco Tails in top 8, which is a lot. That's a lot of Draco Tail in top 8, but none of them were able to win the event. Which of course there's a lot of variance when it comes to like the top 8 of a tournament. A lot of things can happen, you know, a lot of things can be decided by like a single brick or a lucky top deck or whatever, you know, but still the fact that Draco Tail was very well represented in the top cuts but didn't actually manage to win one of these tournaments, I think it speaks volumes about this sort of stuff, right? Like I think Draco Tail was a really solid pick for these tournaments, but I think it was unlikely to win with it because everyone was prepared for it. It's an interesting concept when you're choosing a deck for a tournament that I already talked about in that last video. But I think it checks out, and I think it says nothing about how strong Draco Tail is as a deck. It just means Draco Tail is a consistent and strong deck, but it is, like any Yu-Gi-Oh deck, exploitable. Every Yu-Gi-Oh deck gets worse when everyone expects it. Every Yu-Gi-Oh deck has a smaller chance of winning a tournament if everyone knows it's coming. If everyone knows that it's going to be the most represented deck, then you're going to have a harder time. And this is what's happening to Draco Tail right now. It is a really strong deck, but people are preparing for it, which is why, especially in the later stages of a tournament, it's going to be different. And Vanquish Soul, for the most part, is strong, but I feel like there's also less targeted hate for Vanquish Soul right now. I would say the worst thing that happens to Vanquish Soul at the moment is like when they get hit with a Perulia, that people are mainly playing for Radiant Typhoon, right? But it is, I mean, it's a really strong deck, and it still has a decent Draco Tail matchup. Droll 2? Yes, but the droll argument is probably a stronger one for Vanquish Soul than against Vanquish Soul, because right now, where is Droll? It's in the side deck most of the time. Most of the time, people are side decking Droll and not main decking it, which is statistically a big difference. If you basically never expect to get hit by Droll in game 1, that's a massive deal for decks like that can struggle into Droll. So if Vanquish Soul was able to perform in a format where Droll was at 3, and Droll was also main decked a lot because of Yami and Mitsu, or Yami Mitsu rather, then why would it not be able to perform when Droll is moved to 2 and to the side deck? You know what I mean? Which brings me to, honestly, the biggest surprise for me personally, which is the Malice success at these tournaments, which is crazy to me. And I'm trying to think about how in the world this deck is still doing so well, because I've talked to some people who play Malice or played Malice previously. I talked to Yuna, who she got top 8 at the World Championship with Malice, and she didn't even play Malice anymore. She said, like, oh, in testing, Nibiru was just too big of a problem. And here's the thing, maybe that's one of the reasons why it was still able to perform, because no one plays Nibiru right now. Almost no one. I shouldn't say no one, because some people definitely did, but compared to previous formats, I think Nibiru is at an all-time low in terms of popularity. So I think that could be one of the reasons why Malice was still able to perform. Another reason, and I think this is something that should never be underestimated, is that the non-engine quality in this deck is still insane. So maybe it's not a matter of, because genuinely, maybe the Malice endboard is fine now. Maybe it's because I don't actually think that without Whitebinder, this deck's endboard is that crazy. I genuinely don't think it's something to complain about. From what I've seen, like, the deck is still here, I guess, but I don't feel too negative about Malice right now. I think without Whitebinder, maybe there's a world where I can accept this deck. It still draws 2 from Chessie, 2 from Heat Soul, and plays the best non-engine in the game. Yes. Yes, it is still really powerful, and I think the ability to draw a bunch of cards with the ability, paired with the ability to play this much non-engine, is somewhat of a problem, but I feel like this is more of a, I think this plays maybe it plays more into the thing that I talked about earlier, where I think sometimes non-engine is just too important and too strong going first in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Like, I feel like there is too many situations right now where the game is completely winnable and playable, but then your opponent has opened a lot of non-engine and then you can't win anymore when they went first. And I think Malice might just be one of the more extreme examples of this, because the way I expect this deck to play, and now I haven't done extensive testing with this deck or against this deck for obvious reasons, but if this deck goes first, I would assume that you look at its end board and you're like, okay, that's strong, but that's something I can deal with. But then, because the deck plays 9, 11, 14, 17 hand traps, including some of the most powerful hand traps in the game, like Dominus Impulse, and draws a bunch of cards, what ends up happening is that they go first, it looks winnable, but then as you start playing into the game, into the board, they start revealing more and more of their non-engine, and then you realize, oh, it was never winnable to begin with. You know what I mean? It was always more like that. It kind of was like that. Realistically, yes, yeah, maybe. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it was always like that. I remember it being like that in Master Duel as well. Like, very often I played against Malice with Draco Tail, and then it was like, you know what? I can beat this, but then they had Impulse and Ash, and I got cooked. I don't know. I guess that's the question, right? It's like, is this deck still good? Yes, because it has 1-card combos, it draws cards, and it plays crazy non-engine. So there you go. And people are not playing the cards that are good against it right now. You know, you don't really see people play Lancia. You don't really see people play Nib. If people played Nib everywhere right now, then this deck would definitely suffer. I think you could also argue that non-engine that is too powerful going first is also a problem with how modern archetypes are designed in Yu-Gi-Oh. I think you could argue that too. I think you could argue if Impulse and Ash weren't as powerful as they are when you go first, then maybe this deck wouldn't really be that strong. All right, what else did we have? We don't have the winning list from Dortmund yet, but I think we have the one from, yeah, we have the Vanquish Soul list from the YCS in Mexico, which they did main deck Perulia and Puwalos and Ash and Bell. This is a pretty cookie cutter Vanquish Soul list. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said not every Vanquish Soul played the trap. This one didn't. They cited the trap for going first. This is another thing. I guess, I mean, this is the coldest take ever, but one of the most common things I saw this weekend were cards like Shifter, Fissure, and Different Dimension Ground being like the last bastion of floodgates, I guess. There's like, we are so close to eliminating this shit from the game, but somehow it still always remains. They had the idea to put it back to 3. When did Di-Fi go back to 3? I feel like that's years ago at this point. But yeah, I mean, no one was a fan of that when they did that back then. Tier format? Oh, they did it to answer Tearlament's. It's all Tearlament's fault, right? It's all Tearlament's fault. Spell Canceller too? I mean, by all means, I think the situation is very simple. I think the steps that they've made in the last couple of ban lists were awesome, and you can really tell the difference. There is less floodgating going on than ever, but they do need to make sure to keep going because the job is not done, I think. But yeah, it's decks like it's just like we've moved away. The way I interpret it is we've moved away from some of the super generic floodgates that like every deck can play, looking at cards like Dimensional Barrier, right? Where it's like that's a card that like every deck could play, so every deck did. We've now moved to some more like situational floodgates in the sense that like not every deck can play D-Fissure, right? Like you can only play D-Fissure if your deck doesn't care about the grave, but your opponent's deck does, which as a result means you see less floodgates than before, but you still see them. You know, it's okay, guys. We get Solemn Report soon. Yeah, that's a different topic. That's a different topic. Is there a reason why Lunalight is not played much in the TCG? I think Lunalight is very popular right now. From my personal experience, also looking around at the YCS, I think I saw a decent amount of Lunalight. I really did. Like almost, I remember playing next to Lunalight a bunch of times and thinking like, oh, thank God I didn't get paired against them. But there's a decent amount of Lunalight right now. 3% of representation for Luna. Yeah, I mean that is a lot. Does Lunalight have any game plan except Liger? Not really, but to be fair, you don't really need another game plan if your game plan is that card. That card is crazy. Radiant Typhoon Tri-Brigade Yummy won the NA-YCS in the hands of Kamal Crooks Valdez. Of course, I think 7th YCS win at this point. Crazy achievement. I mean, not like the 6th wasn't already a crazy achievement, but this one also really impressive. And I gotta admit, I didn't believe in this deck because I think it's rather weak into Molcharmies, but I think that is more of a personal preference kind of thing for me. I just don't like playing decks that fold too hard to a Molcharmy. Which I think this deck does, but at the same time, you don't get Fuvat every time, and if you don't get Fuvat, then this deck is really strong. Kamal's the king of winning with decks that lose to Charmies, Christian, and now this. I think that's very much it. I think it's just like statistically, it's okay to play combo decks, even in a world where Fuwalos exist. I just don't like exposing myself to that level of variance. Of like, I want to go first and not get Fuvat, and if that happens, then I win. But it's been proven over and over that it can work, you know. But I just remember looking at yesterday. I remember looking at the list from Mario D'Amico, who got 2nd at this YCS. I remember looking at it And I remember thinking it's crazy that Kamal won. I feel like this deck with this, look at this side deck. This should slaughter this, in my opinion. The fact that he opened no Fuwa, no Purulia, no Nib, and I don't know if he put in the Droll as well in this matchup, but like this deck should be giga favored over this deck. And he just opened like none of those cards in game 3 going second. He lost the dice roll. Didn't have Fuwa game 1, I believe. I didn't watch the full finals. I think I skipped through it. Because I was tired. I watched it at night when I was back home. But I think game 1, I think Kamal went first and like full comboed. And then Mario won game 2, and then game 3 he opened, I think he opened Holisu, but like it was like Holisu, 2 Raisin, Jiaolong, and Bell, and then the Jiaolong got ashed. So he didn't have a dark for Holisu. So yeah, it was pretty rough, especially and then I looked at the list after and I was like, that's crazy that worked. The roll for the starting player was already hype. It was 12 versus 12, and then Kamal rolled in 11. That is insane. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes you can win unfavored matchups if your opponent just doesn't have one of the Charmies or the Nib, right? And this deck is essentially really strong against all of the other non-engine that people play. I think this deck has a very easy time of playing through stuff like Ash or Bell, and playing through stuff like the Fallen and the Virtuous and Draco Tail traps, you know, all the small interruptions. I think you have a pretty good chance of pushing through, because you've got Droplet, you got your own Ash and Bell, you've got your MST package to dodge flames and stuff like that. So I think it's cool in that regard. But I personally didn't expect it to perform that well, but it did. That's interesting to see. And the end board, by all means, the end board is completely insane. Pac getting scammed by Judge Call was Sag. What happened there? I didn't hear about that. The 5 Garnets inside is crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's classic NA, right? To be fair, it's not even classic NA. It's just classic modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's like, if your deck doesn't get 10 times more toxic after siding, then what are you even doing? I suppose. The side deck conversation, I feel like at this point it's becoming a cold take to say that the side deck is kind of toxic in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe always has been for like years. Radiant spell, imperm in the column, MST target radiant spell to dodge. The judge ruled it dodged. So Pac had an imperm. Oh yeah, that shouldn't dodge, right? Because the effect still resolves on the field. It still negates that one, yeah. Had to MST the imperm. Had to MST the hold up. If this card was set before activations on the field, their resolution for the rest of this turn, effects in this column are negated. So if it is not in the column anymore, it cannot check for the column anymore. But if the other card is gone, it works because the effect still resolves in that column. But wouldn't for that... Oh no, it's because it says is on the field at resolution. That's why it says that. Right? If it didn't say this, it would still negate. But yeah, no, it should still... It is very counterintuitive, but it should still negate, yeah. Did Pac lose a feature match because of that? Or what happened?
It's negated.
Yeah. Yeah, that sucks. What else do we have? We have... Alright, we've talked about Draco Tail. We've talked... Radiant Typhoon. How do you guys feel about Radiant Typhoon's performance this weekend? Because I know that the week leading up to the YCS, in my testing circle, people were really expecting a lot of Radiant Typhoon. And everyone was like, you know, it's everywhere. People are testing it. People are preparing for it. Like, it almost felt like for a brief period in time, Radiant Typhoon was a more anticipated deck than branded Draco Tail for this YCS, which I always thought was kind of crazy. I always thought like it was going to be more branded Draco Tail than Radiant Typhoon in terms of representation for sure. But maybe at like day 2 or top player level, maybe there would be more people deciding to play Radiant Typhoon. I wasn't sure about that. Ultimately, I would say the Radiant Typhoon performance, a little bit underwhelming. The the best placement for Radiant, the best placement for Radiant Typhoon was top 4. One top 4 in Mexico. No, not even a top 8 at Richmond. Not even a top 16 at Richmond. One top 32. And then we have one top 8 in Dortmund. That's rough. And I don't know. I can only say from my perspective of playing against the deck, I definitely Radiant Typhoon was the deck that I played against the second most this weekend. I played against 7 Draco Tail, 4 Radiant Typhoon. I beat all the Radiant Typhoon, and it was also the brickiest deck I faced. Like, there was no deck where my opponents drew as bad as they did with Radiant Typhoon, which was my #1 concern with the deck beforehand, but it was definitely confirmed. Like, I had 2 opponents go first with Radiant Typhoon and just pass, with setting some spells, obviously, but yeah. Radiant Typhoon is the new Memento. I think Radiant Typhoon, the one thing that Radiant Typhoon does really well is go into other decks and make them stronger. Like, this is something, we see this, you know, Radiant Typhoon is in the winning deck for YCS Richmond. They play Radiant Typhoon as an engine to get going. Really strong there. The Memento deck played Radiant Typhoon as well to go into the Goblin Biker Exceed, right? We've seen in the past, I don't know if they're doing it right now. No, they are doing it. We see Malice siding the Radiant Typhoon cards for going first. So they're doing a lot of that stuff. There was one really cool thing I saw as well from Luca. I don't know if the deck list is here. I think he posted it on Twitter, but Luca was siding Radiant Typhoon Crocea against Radiant Typhoon, which I thought was really funny. Because he just put in, like, I think he was playing Magistus Draco Tail, and then just played like the Radiant Typhoon quick play spell, MST, and Crocea in the side deck, so that when you go second against Radiant Typhoon and they activate a quick play spell, you just summon Crocea and go +2, which I think is also kind of funny. I don't know, Radiant Typhoon is a really cool deck, but I just feel like you're exposing yourself to some variance. I gotta say, my favorite thing with Radiant Typhoon by far is Sheena. I think Sheena is such a strong and fun card. I think all things considered, the deck underperformed slightly, but still did okay. 2 Mitsu in top 16 is not bad. I think in hindsight, the last ban list really was pretty solid, because even the decks that I felt like they hit pretty hard still somehow survived. I mean, Yummy literally won one of the tournaments and is still showing up in these top cuts. You know, we've got it won YCS Richmond. It got second at YCS Mexico, and we had a couple of Yummies in top 16 in Europe as well. So Yummy by all means is not dead. I guess we'll have to wait and see how this develops, because one of the things that I feel like would happen now after this YCS is people will probably start playing more Nibiru. This is the #1 takeaway from this YCS, is that Nibiru should still be in people's decks, because like I didn't play Nibiru because I played Sky Striker, but had I played Draco Tail, I would have played Nib, because I would have at least considered siding it, or rather my last list before the tournament that I would have played had Nib in the side deck, because I wanted to respect those types of decks in the side deck at least. And I don't even think Nibiru is that bad against the modern, like the new version of Draco Tail. It's fine. It's not crazy, but it's okay. If they open Albaz, they'll play into it. Are you the only striker player? I mean, I think so. Yeah, it was a really there's one in top 64 actually in Europe. We had a fellow striker enjoyer in top 64. It was Steve. Made top 64 with Sky Striker. Dinka Bui also played striker, but I think Dinka Bui didn't make top 64. He was close, but not quite. How is Malice not dead? Dude, I don't know, man. I really thought in their defense, because people are saying like, oh, why can't they hit Malice properly? I think I also thought it was gone, to be fair. I think they wanted to kill it, and I think they thought it was enough, but it turns out we were all wrong. And I was wrong too. I thought it was dead, but it apparently isn't. Danilo was sounding the alarm. Yeah, I saw that. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe it, but I gotta admit the deck is not dead. And Mitsu too, by the way. That's the thing, right? Like a lot of the decks that people were like complaining about that they hit too hard on the ban list, like Yami and maybe even Mitsu. I don't think anyone was complaining about Habakiri to 1, to be fair. But Mitsu, and this is the most important thing. The deck that's performing now is pure Mitsu. This is how it should have been always. Get rid of them stupid bridges, okay? Let people play pure Mitsurugi. It's completely fine. No one has ever complained about playing against pure Mitsurugi. Every time I see a Mitsurugi card activated, I hope it's pure Mitsurugi. I want it to be pure Mitsurugi. People have for sure. I mean, yeah. Okay, no one in their right mind has complained about pure Mitsurugi. Let me phrase it like that, because yes, you will find someone who has complained about it, obviously, yes. Should have phrased that better. And it's the somewhat annoying thing is that it's the same thing that's happening with like Radiant Typhoon right now. It's like, okay, pure Radiant Typhoon is a strong deck and everything, but like the stuff that's winning is the one that's using Radiant Typhoon to do Yummy Tri-Brigade combo, or make the deck even combo heavier in that way. And that's like, okay, cool. The last time I complained was probably because my opponent got Habakir with Prosperity. Sure. Imagine having proper locks. It's kind of weird, but like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think to an extent this is also fine, realistically. As long as the deck has distinct weaknesses, like for example, this deck, right? You might think like, oh, Josh is gonna find this deck incredibly cringe because it's like a slop combination of Tri-Brigade, Yummy, and Radiant Typhoon. I don't feel that way about this deck. Like, I think this is a combo deck through and through, and it is not my style of deck, but I do not hate the fact that it exists because I feel like this deck has reasonable counterplay. And I think if people expect it in the format, they can properly prepare for it, and there's enough ways to like outmaneuver it. I don't think that combo decks as a whole shouldn't exist, in case that wasn't clear. I think it's completely okay for different playstyles to exist. What I want is for there to be a balance between those strategies. You know, those strategies need to all be at roughly similar power levels for it to be okay, in my opinion. I have my worst time in a format is when there's only combo decks and the combo decks are all significantly stronger than everything else, and so I'm forced to play a combo deck or I'm forced to play a complete underdog deck, and I'm gonna have a really hard time against all the combo decks in the format. If this deck is just one of many decks in a format that is just a little more combo heavier than the others, but therefore also has a harder time into stuff like Fuwa, Purulia, and Nibiru, that's fine. At least the way I feel about it. So it's not that I don't want the playstyle to exist at all. I think it's okay. I as much as I want my playstyle to be represented, I think it's important that the combo playstyle in modern Yu-Gi-Oh is also represented. And I genuinely, I look at this deck and I have no issue with it, even if it's not my style. Because we're not even trying to floodgate the opponent out of the game. There's like a world of difference between this deck and like K9 Crystron. All right, there's no cards in here that negate your opponent's hand traps in Engine. Of course, there is Called by an Ash Blossom, which is a different topic, but there's no like, I make Ripper, I negate your hand traps. I make Ripper, I punish your hand traps. I make a completely unbreakable board with spell cancel that locks you out of the game, you know, like, or whatever. And they're not giving the opponent artifact Mjolnir. Like, this is just, it is just a combo deck, you know, but there's no like punish hand traps, negate hand traps, put up floodgates in this deck, right? Totem Bird is kind of strong though. I mean, I'm not saying it's not strong. Like, yes, it's not my favorite play style and it is strong, but it's not necessarily toxic. Pure Mitsu is the best deck in the OCG right now. Do you think it's not too much? The new cards over there mostly help consistently, not stealing. The Demise Ritual monster definitely helps sealing, because it gives you a third Mitsurugi ritual per turn. That's not just consistency, that is definitely sealing. I mean, I guess that's the most interesting part about this whole thing, is like, where do we go from here, right? Because I think right now, from my experience, I experienced this YCS as a very positive one, and not just because of my own performance being pretty solid and something I'm happy with, but just the format in general. The Yu-Gi-Oh that was played this weekend, from what I've seen and what I've experienced, was pretty good. Whether it was the Vanquish Souls, the Draco Tails, the Radiant Typhoons, the Yummies, there's a lot of the Mitsurugis, there's a lot of decks here that I think represent a lot of what I think is good Yu-Gi-Oh. Some are more combo heavy, some are less combo heavy, but in general, I think the game is going in a really solid direction. It is not perfect by any means. I've seen games end to a single dimension shifter. I've seen dimensional fissure. I even played different dimension ground myself. And I'm also seeing some combo decks that are stronger than what I think they should be, like K9 Crystron, even though it's not performing, which I'm happy about. But still, it's not like it's the perfect format, but it's a lot of the things that are happening right now in Yu-Gi-Oh are pretty awesome. I've had a really good time, and I'm really looking forward what's ahead in 2026. For now, I guess the takeaway from this is that Draco Tail Branded is both the most expected, but also for good reason considered to be one of the most powerful decks in the format. It had very solid performances at all 3 YCSs, even though it wasn't able to take one down. But I would still consider, like, let's say I was going to regionals and I just wanted to go a solid X2 to make sure I bring home some solid amount of worlds points. I think Draco Tail is like the deck to do that. So that's kind of like the position of Draco Tail. It's like the consistent and strong deck that everyone is expecting. But then I do think we're going to see a surge from this YCS. We're definitely going to see a surge in Vanquish Souls, Malice, and Yummy decks as well, because it's now been proven that they are at least capable of performing again. So if that means people are going to start playing cards like Nibiru again, then those decks could struggle as well, you know? So I guess we'll have to wait and see where that goes. Bergik, thank you for the 30 months. Also, congrats on the, what was it, top 8 or top 4? Either way, congratulations. Will you co-stream YCS Sydney? They announced the stream. I know I've put it into my calendar. I don't know if I know I have a regional on that weekend. I know I have a regional on the Saturday of the YCS Sydney, but I think I might stream day 2. You were right about Megistus. Before the event, a lot of people were talking about it being more viable. The Megistus performance does not surprise me in the slightest. I think it is a strong deck, but there's no real reason to play it. Like, people will always yearn for more sealing, but in certain situations it's just not worth it. Like, quite frankly, I think if you are a Draco Tail player and you want something with more sealing, then you should not be a Draco Tail player. I think it's simple as that. I think it's completely okay to want to play a combo deck, but I don't think it is the best thing in the world to do to turn Draco Tail, out of all things, into a combo deck. Like, some decks have lower ceiling than other decks, and they have other advantages, like being good into Fuwa, for example. If that's important to you, if you want a good deck into Fuwa that's more like mid-rangey and makes less powerful boards, then you can play Draco Tail. If you want to play a higher ceiling combo deck that has sacrifices like you know, like now weaker into Fuwa and Nib and whatever, but you have a higher ceiling and more like combo potential, you can play stuff like this that doesn't have 3 trap cards in the main deck, for example, as requirements or whatever, you know? So by all means, I think Branded Draco Tail with Megistus is a solid deck, and I think Pack did well with it. But I personally, I think this is more of a... Pack got top 32. I think Pack... this is more of a Pack performance than the actual deck performance, realistically. I think Pack could have done well with other decks as well. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't really looked into the numbers yet, but there is a couple of Spentas here in this overview. I see 2 here. But for the most part, the overwhelming majority, and it's not close, of good performing Draco Tail decks were all just Albaz, no Spenta. There's a cool tune down here. What? That's interesting to see. Oh yeah, they have Zalen now. The last time I played this deck, we didn't have Zalen yet. Ooh. Kind of want to give this deck a shot in the TCG at some point in the upcoming weeks. Am I weird? Guys, you have to tell me. I'm feeling something, and I don't know if it's weird or not to feel the way I'm feeling right now, because one deck that I kind of wanted to play throughout my testing process for YCS Dortmund, but I didn't end up having the time to properly look into it, is Branded. I kind of have the urge to become a Brandy for a while. Is that weird right now? Because I've never really been one, but right now the new Albaz is really fun, and I feel a little weird about just playing Draco Tail all the time, because I mean it's not like it's getting boring, but I kind of like it is very standard. But it was the profile that we watched last week of Branded topping a regional, where it was just like a really grindy version that was closer to 40 cards, and it doesn't play the floodgates at all anymore. There was no Sanctifier shenanigans or whatever. It was just good old Branded grind game, have like 58 activations in the end phase, and then outgrind it with the opponent. I thought that looked fun. I thought about like trying that deck a little bit, maybe. Sanctifier is such a fun card when it's not used for bullshit. Yes, I agree with that. I think Sanctifier is also one of the funniest, one of the funnest things about playing Branded Fusion in Draco Tail is that you just make Sanctifier, but you do nothing crazy with it. I guess some people are doing stuff like Christia, but realistically, most of the time I see Sanctifier at the moment, it's to like revive Frixel on the opponent's turn, or bring back Albaz, or bring back Lucius, and I think that stuff's just awesome.